All right, tool number 2 is avoid ideological thinking. An ideology is defined as, quote, a system of ideas and ideals, especially one which forms the basis of economic or political theory and policy. But a wider definition would include everything from human psychology to metaphysics to spirituality to pretty much everything else that humans do or think about. People often seem fairly certain about their position, and it may be based on a theory. And what people don't often realize is that that theory may just be one among many competing theories. But instead of reviewing all the different theories on offer and comparing them, trying to see what they have in common, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each, people just don't even seek out the other theories. They don't sometimes realize that they exist. And after all, they probably came across that theory because some smart person was espousing it or talking about it. So if a smart person believes it, well, maybe it is true. This often happens when we become enthralled by a particular author or a writer, a theorist, or a school of thought. And then we often take on the position that the author has regarding other competing theories. Namely, we dismiss them. One thing to be especially wary of here is good writing. Good writing is often a sign of clear thinking, but that does not mean that the writer is always correct. It simply means that he or she is very good at articulating their position clearly and coherently. In other words, just because something appears true and it sounds good on its face doesn't mean that it is true. The 20th century economist John Maynard Keynes was speaking precisely about this point when he said, quote, practical men who believe themselves to be quite exempt from any intellectual influence are usually the slaves of some defunct economist. Madmen in authority who hear voices in the air are distilling their frenzy from some academic scribbler of a few years back. And if you realize that you've done this, that you've kind of fallen into the trap of listening to just one school of thought, when there are others that may be just as valid, you should seek out that information. And if that information conflicts with your belief, you have a choice. You can either dismiss that information out of hand or evaluate on its own terms. The British journalist and novelist Alex Marwood explains this point in an article when she wrote, quote, a healthy person will adjust their thinking to allow for new knowledge. Someone in the grip of an ideology will simply bounce the discordant fact out without ever grappling with it. Now, Marwood was talking about cults and Keynes was talking about economics. But I think you can see how this applies to pretty much everything else, and especially to controversial issues